I would like to invite Rostislav Tkachenko, great Ukrainian theologian and our colleague from Eastern European Institute of Theology, and also lecturer at the Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary, to introduce our today's speaker.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good afternoon or good morning for those who are on the other side of the globe. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker, and this is Monsignor Robert Vitillo. He is the Secretary General of the International Catholic Migration Commission, and he has been in that role since 2016, if I'm correct. He's also a member of the Vatican dicastery for promoting integral human development. I think he has been in that role since 2021. Originally, Monsignor Vitillo is a native of New Jersey, but he has spent a lot of years in Europe and also did some work even in Ukraine, and today we will hear about that. He is a trained theologian and social worker, educated at Marquette University, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and Rutgers University in New Jersey. Formerly, he also served as the head of the Caritas Internationalis delegation and an attaché for permanent observer mission of the Holy See to the United Nations. He dedicated his whole life to working in the area of social work and helping refugees, displaced people, HIV positive people, and also organizations which work to eradicate poverty and social injustice. And as far as I know, he has published on global health, on HIV/AIDS, on pastoral work among the HIV people and other vulnerable people, and also wrote on migration and refugee resettlements, child welfare, and other relevant topics. So it is our joy that he is joining us today and will talk about the Catholic response to migration and to various issues pertaining to this big topic. So I gladly welcome Monsignor Vitillo, and now the microphone and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. And it's a real privilege for me to have received the invitation from the Eastern European Institute for Theology to share some reflections and good practice examples with you today in relation to the migration of peoples and their rights to migrate or to stay or return to their places and countries of origin. As a senior advisor at the dicastery, focusing mainly on global health, migration, and labor, I'm deeply honored to be with you today. You could, next slide, that's it. I'd like to begin by giving you a brief vision of the numbers of people affected by migration in today's world. Sorry, you could go back to the one with the numbers, yes. Of the estimated 281 million international migrants in the world today, sorry, that's it, great. You could stay there, I'll let you know when we're advancing. So of the 281 million international migrants in the world during 2020, you can see that 117 million of these are considered to be forcibly displaced. They did not, as I did, voluntarily move to other countries, and perhaps some of you, but I know that some of you also have been forcibly displaced from your country as well. Unfortunately, Ukraine knows this very well because since 2014, you've had displacement, and also much more urgently since 2022. But let's not only focus on the numbers. As Pope Francis of blessed memory frequently reminded us, and I quote, "Migrants and refugees are not pawns on the chessboard of humanity. They are children, women, and men forced to leave their homes for various reasons, who share a legitimate desire for knowing and having, but above all, for being more. The sheer number of migrating People migrating from one continent to another or shifting places within their own countries and geographical areas is striking. Contemporary movements of migration represent the largest movement of individuals, if not of peoples, in history. As the Church accompanies migrants and refugees on their journey, she seeks to understand the causes of migration, but she also works to overcome its negative effects and to maximize its positive influence on the communities of origin, transit, and destination. End of quote. You can advance to the next slide, please. Christian teaching is firmly rooted in concern for migrants. Welcoming the stranger is an ancient religious value. For Christians, this concern originated with our Jewish ancestors who shared our faith in the one true God. The Jewish people were instructed in the book of Exodus, "You shall not oppress a resident alien. You well know how it feels to be an alien, since you once were aliens yourselves in the land of Egypt." The book of Leviticus turned this principle into a Jewish law. You shall treat the alien who resides with you no differently than the natives born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself. St. Paul warned, do not neglect hospitality, for through it, some have unknowingly entertained angels. And in that case, he was referring back to the experience of Abraham. In his first encyclical, Deus Caritas Est, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI made the point that the early Christians were inspired to expand the concept of neighbor from one's own family or physical neighbors or members of one's own tribe to all the members of the known human family in that era. During the Middle Ages, even secular authorities recognized the status of sanctuary and did not violate the rights of those who sought refuge in monasteries or churches. That practice remained for many centuries thereafter, but sadly, it is not respected so firmly in today's world. For example, in the United States, the present crackdown on irregular migrants recently has seen governmental police entering church buildings and grounds and arresting persons who could not produce their migration documents on the spot. These ancient religious teachings and traditions should provide us present-day believers with the foundation of our efforts to provide protection, humanitarian assistance, integration into the first countries of asylum, and resettlement to third countries for people whose lives and future are in danger because of their national, ethnic, religious, political, or sociocultural background. Papal teaching during the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries have further developed both the doctrinal and the practical foundations for our Catholic Church response to refugees, forced migrants, internally displaced persons, and survivors of human trafficking. And as I refer to the Catholic Church teachings and practice, I'm fully aware that many of the Protestant churches also have similar teachings and similar practices. But I'm sharing with you my own experience in the Catholic Church. The Venerable Pope Pius XII issued the Apostolic Constitution Exul Familia Nazaretana in 1952. After reviewing the scriptural and doctrinal teaching on welcoming the stranger and the practical and pastoral efforts in response to the needs of refugees and other migrants as they were undertaken by the Church through various crises and historical periods, and he himself extended that kind of aid to many, many people during the Second World War. He expressed his commitment to maintain and even increase such efforts. I quote, "Many organizations, including a number of official agencies, both national and international, have vied and still vie with one another in assisting migrants, relieving moral as well as material wants. Nevertheless, because of our supreme and universal ministry, we must continue to look with the greatest love after our sons who are caught in the trials and misfortunes of exile, and to strive with all our resources to help them. While we do not neglect whatever material assistance is permitted, we seek primarily to aid them with spiritual consolation. He also took the opportunity to note the mission and mandate of the organization for which I served as Secretary General between 2016 and 2024. I quote, "Very recently, we approved the International Catholic Migration Commission, whose function is to unite and organize existing Catholic association and committees, and to promote, reinforce, and coordinate their projects and activities in behalf of migrants and refugees." We'll talk more about that organization a little later in our conversation. Long before civil authorities or academic experts made connections between migration and development, St. Paul VI did so in his groundbreaking encyclical Populorum Progressio, or On the Development of Peoples, when he stated, and I quote, "Emigrant workers should also be given a warm welcome. Their living conditions often are inhuman, and they must scrimp on their earnings in order to send help to their families who have remained behind in their native land in poverty." He also identified comprehensive nature of human development, which certainly is relevant to an integrated response by the Church to people on the move. I quote, "The development we speak of here cannot be restricted to economic growth alone. To be authentic, it must be well-rounded. It must foster the development of each man and of the whole man. As an eminent specialist on this question rightly has said, we cannot allow economics to be separated from human realities, nor development from the civilization in which it takes place. What counts for us is man, each individual, each human group, and humanity as a whole," end of quote. St. John Paul II affirmed a broad range of rights among refugees and migrants when he said during an address to officials charged with pastoral care of people on the move in 1985, I quote, "The Church, mother and teacher, should remind all the migrants that is their own right to decide whether they wish to stay in their new conditions of life, always being in solidarity with the others, and to avoid being reduced to the simple role of instruments of production, and to participate in social life of the country, and even in certain instances, to political life. There is much to do to help migrants benefit from a status that gives them the right to live their originality in national solidarity. This is more complex than simply being measured by naturalization." The late Pope Benedict XVI focused on the nexus between migration and development when he declared, and I quote, "Authentic development always features solidarity. In fact, in an increasingly globalized society, the common good and the effort to obtain it cannot fail to assume the dimensions of the whole human family. That is to say, the community of peoples and nations. Indeed, the current process of globalization can represent a propitious opportunity for promoting integral development, but only if cultural differences are accepted as an opportunity for meeting and dialogue, and if the unequal distribution of the world's resources leads to a new awareness of the necessary solidarity which must unite the human family." Next slide, please. Refugees have been accorded special protection status from time immemorial. In ancient Greece, citizens whose safety was threatened in their place of origin were welcomed and granted protective status. Thus, the concept of asylum was developed. The latter was codified into international law. In modern times, many of the world leaders emerging from the atrocities and tragedies of the First and Second World Wars expressed determination to avoid such loss and damage to the sacredness of human life and dignity in the future. Regrettably, their hopes and dreams were not fully achieved, since hundreds of wars and civil conflicts have occurred since 1945. However, the international community, especially the United Nations Organization and some regional and intergovernmental organizations, such as the Organization of African Unity, have developed international legal instruments to promote and monitor respect for the rights of refugees and migrants. In some cases, their instruments represent binding obligations for signatory governments. In other cases, they have been developed as guidelines for practice and depend on the political will of the associated governments. Here are just a few of the most important international instruments. In 1948, through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all countries recognized the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution and insisted on the principle of non-refoulement, or no forced return of refugees to their countries of origin. The Geneva Convention, related to the status of refugees in 1951, was the first international agreement covering the most fundamental aspects of a refugee's life. It spelled out a set of human rights that should be at least equivalent to freedoms enjoyed by foreign nationals living legally in a given country, and in many cases, those of citizens of that state. The Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degraded Treatment or Punishment in 1984 constitutes binding law for all those states that have ratified it. The monitoring body of this convention, the Committee Against Torture, established some fundamental principles relating to the expulsion of refused asylum seekers. The Convention on the Rights of the Child declares that states parties shall provide cooperation in efforts to protect and assist such a child to trace the parents or other members of the family of any refugee child. The International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families was launched in 1990, but did not enter into force until 2003. This instrument emphasizes the principle of non-discrimination, grants a fairly broad series of rights to all migrant workers and members of their families, irrespective of their migratory status. Next slide, please. Maybe we could stop there for a moment and see if any of you have any questions or comments from this first part of the presentation.
I think we don't have questions at the moment, so you probably may
Okay.
go on, and we will have the Q&A session in the end.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, then I'd like to share with you now a brief video presentation of our office, the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, as background for our engagement in accompanying local Catholic Church structures and organizations in their response to the needs of migrants, refugees, internally displaced persons, and in their efforts to promote integral human development among all members of the human family, in view of their human dignity and the right to life from conception to natural death, since they have been created in the image and likeness of God. And then later, after the end of the presentation, I can entertain any questions about the dicastery as well. So now if we could show this video, and I'll mention that because our working language is in Italian, some of the people speaking will be in Italian, but you will have English subtitles. So please, you can start the video.
All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures.
Tu che circondi con la tua tenerezza tutto quanto esiste.
Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty.
Inondaci di pace, perché viviamo come fratelli e sorelle senza nuocere a nessuno.
O Dio dei poveri, aiutaci a riscattare gli abbandonati e i dimenticati di questa terra, che tanto valgono ai tuoi occhi.
Integral human development is the name for what all of us want. Development is what everyone wants for themselves, for their family, for their people. That is a meaning of life itself.
Non è sicuramente crescita economica, non è tendere ad avere sempre di più, non è legato solo alle dimensioni materiali di una persona. Sviluppo umano integrale significa sviluppo di tutta la persona in tutte le sue dimensioni e di tutte le persone, nessuno escluso.
Our dicastery works in 3 steps. The first step is to listen.
It is the section that creates a two-way bridge between the local churches and the dicastery.
Il punto più importante per noi, per essere in dialogo in maniera che noi siamo a servizio, non siamo sopra le chiese locali, è proprio quello di ascoltare, di capire cosa sta succedendo e di capire quali sono i bisogni più profondi.
We try to listen to the local churches. We try to listen to the bishops and those who work with them to see what are the obstacles that people face in that place, the obstacles to their integral human development.
Ostacoli legati al degrado ambientale, non si può vivere dove non si riesce neanche a respirare. Ostacoli legati alla mancanza di lavoro, a non essere trattati in maniera degna quando si lavora, ma quasi come schiavi.
The challenge is always seeing these people struggling, frustrated, being abused, living under violence, and not really being able to assist in the immediate. So it requires a lot of patience. Well, I pray to always be patient, and I'm not sure, though sometimes our contacts are not very patient, because when the person is burning, it's difficult to be patient.
The second step is to reflect on these sufferings.
Sembra una catena di montaggio, ma non lo è. Si lavora molto insieme e si è divisi per le competenze che ciascuno deve avere in ogni sezione.
La sezione ricerca e riflessione cerca di identificare degli esperti in università, in centri di ricerca, che stanno lavorando con i temi che le chiese ci portano come preoccupazioni, come priorità. Facciamo una rete per arrivare a degli strumenti che possono tornare alle chiese come un servizio.
And we call these concrete orientations, pastoral orientation. It's to help the bishop and his co-workers to accompany their people in facing their challenges.
Le sfide ci mettono in movimento. Il fascino è quello, da una parte avere davanti delle complessità, delle realtà come guerre, come ingiustizie, e dall'altra essere a contatto con degli esperti, con dei progetti, delle organizzazioni che davvero stanno facendo qualcosa, stanno muovendo dei processi, e questo porta speranza.
And then the third step is to give back what we have learned to the church that shared with us, and at the same time to make this learning available throughout the church, around the world, and to the larger public.
Noi come sezione comunicazione abbiamo l'opportunità di dare la voce agli ultimi, davvero riportare gli ultimi al centro, quello che Papa Francesco spesso ci dice, queste periferie esistenziali, farle ridiventare il centro della narrazione. È una sfida, è faticoso, perché in un mondo dove 90 voci dicono di avere paura dell'altro, essere quella che dice accogliamo il prossimo, accogliamo l'altro non è facile. In un mondo dei social anche, dove è molto più facile comunicare qualcosa di negativo perché va subito virale, essere la voce che dice qualcosa di buono si può fare anche se è più faticoso, Ovviamente è più difficile arrivare, però quando lo fa porta davvero tantissimi frutti.
My hope for our dicastery is expressed maybe in this cross which I wear. It's made from the wood of an old fishing boat that migrants used to try to reach Europe, to reach Lampedusa. My hope for our dicastery is to help the Church to recognize how Christ is crucified in all the different places and in all the different challenges of the world, and to accompany the people in their suffering, and to bring Christ's love, His mercy, to them in their difficulties, so that they may feel blessed and especially given the gift of hope.
Okay, so now we'll look at some ways in which the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development serves the Pope as he fulfills his task of leadership to the Catholic Church worldwide, and as a major religious leader who is respected and sought for guidance, understanding, insight, and compassion as a moral compass in today's world by heads of state, humanitarian leaders, scientific experts, political and social leaders, and people of goodwill, and many who are experiencing deep human need. We'll focus on the specific topic of migration in this presentation, but the leadership of the Holy Father is requested across a wide range of religious, moral, and social issues that influence the promotion of integral human development. And in this regard, the dicastery is expected to be of service to the Pope, the hierarchy or the bishops of the Church, the local churches throughout the world, including bishops, clergy, congregations of religious sisters, brothers, and priests, and all the Catholic faithful, and other people of faith and of goodwill. The next slide, please. Thank you. Pope Francis himself served as an outstanding inspiration and mentor for the dicastery service to the Church throughout the world, as she responded to the needs of migrants, refugees, and survivors of human trafficking. Shortly after he began his service as the head of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Francis chose the destination of Lampedusa, an island off Sicily, as the destination for his first trip outside Rome. And you may recall from the video that Cardinal Czerny, our prefect, was showing his pectoral cross that's made out of the wood of one of the ships that sunk while the refugees were trying to get to Lampedusa. And at that time, many people lost their lives. He did this to commemorate the lives and the memories of thousands of forced migrants attempting to escape war, violence, persecution, discrimination, and the lack of access to basic human needs, but who lost their lives at sea because they were packed into faulty boats which were not seaworthy. And in most cases, they had to pay huge sums to human traffickers who had little respect or care for their human cargo. The Pope did not mince words. He called injustice and rejection for what these sins really are. And he made clear that his intention was to awaken our consciences. He also used simple but powerful imagery. What child or adult has not enjoyed playing with soap bubbles, he said. But while engaging with such play, they have learned the lesson of how little substance is in such soap bubbles. He was not afraid to challenge us on the soap bubbles when we construct and engage in the sin of globalized indifference, and reverted to the haunting question of God himself to Cain after he committed the first murder known to the human family. Adam, where are you? Cain, where is your brother? Next slide, please. Pope Leo also has begun very quickly as the new Pope in focusing on the welcome that we need to give to migrants and refugees. In an interview In his address with the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See shortly after he was elected Pope, he said, "My own story is that of a citizen, the descendant of immigrants who in turn chose to emigrate. All of us in the course of our lives can find ourselves healthy or sick, employed or unemployed, living in our native land or in a foreign country, yet our dignity always remains unchanged. It is the dignity of a creature willed and loved by God. No one is exempted from striving to ensure respect for the dignity of every person, especially the most frail and vulnerable, from the unborn to the elderly, from the sick to the unemployed, citizens and immigrants alike." Next slide, please. And so now I'll share with you some of the things that we do at the Dicastery for Integral Human Development to help the Pope and the Church locally throughout the world focus on these issues. First of all, the Dicastery produces some videos every year on the occasion of the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. It used to be held at the beginning of January each year, but more recently, it's been transferred to the last Sunday of September. And so in 2024, we focused some videos on the theme of the World Day of Migrants for 2024, God Walks with His People. And so we have two videos that I placed up there that you can use. I hope that they will share with you these slides. And I should say that also for different slides, I have notes at the bottom with much more information that I'm sharing with you today. And so please feel free to use those resources if it's helpful to you. Also, next slide, please. We also produced some videos in 2024 for that same theme, but focusing on the local church responses. And in this case, we focus on the situation in Central America, where many people are coming up from South America, through Central America, through Mexico, and then we're trying to get to the United States. That border has now been closed by the new administration of the United States. But there are some very, very dangerous territories that they need to go through in Central America, especially an area of mud and very severe water that they have to walk through. And so we focus these videos on their experiences and got their own testimony from the people. And of course, the reasons they were going was not simply wanting to make more money. For them, most of them, this was an issue of survival and of trying to be sure that their children would have a better future than they had been able to have in their home countries. Also, many were escaping war and terrorism in their countries. Next slide, please. The Dicastery also assists the popes by proposing the theme in the draft text for an annual Catholic Church observance of this World Day for Migrants and Refugees, which presently is held the last Sunday of September. This observance was instituted by Pope Benedict XV in 1914. This Pope assumed leadership of the Catholic Church a few weeks following the outbreak of World War I. He immediately called for a ceasefire, but was ignored as increasing numbers of countries entered the war. Once the King of Italy took up arms, he literally became a prisoner in Vatican City, which is a separate country, but he could not leave the walls in the Vatican. But he continued throughout the conflict to issue proclamations calling for peace and a diplomatic resolution to the war, as well as providing humanitarian aid to the affected populations, including relief services for the wounded, refugees, and war orphans. This aid, the cost of which brought the Vatican to the brink of bankruptcy, included the opening of a Vatican office called the Opera dei Prigionieri, Work for Prisoners, aimed at communicating with and reuniting prisoners of war with their families. Before his death, Pope Francis designated the theme of Migrants, Missionaries of Hope for the 111th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, in keeping with the Jubilee year's theme that we're now celebrating, Pilgrims of Hope, in order to highlight the courage and tenacity of migrants and refugees who bear witness daily to the hope for the future, despite the difficulties that they're in right now. And Pope Leo, when he was elected, confirmed that we would use this theme in September, the 29th of September, for the World Day, the 111th World Day of Migrants and Refugees. And recently, he released his message for that day. The next slide, please. So now I'm going to share with you how the Holy See as a country, and also how the local churches, religious congregations, Catholic-inspired organizations are in service to and advocate with a partnership with migrants and refugees on the global, regional, and national and local scales. Next slide, please. So in view of the 2016 UN Summit on Mass Movements of Migrants and Refugees, and the commitment of states to develop and approve before the end of 2018, 2 global compacts, one focusing on refugees and other focusing on migrants, Pope Francis reminded us that the coming months represent a privileged opportunity. He said, "Dear brothers and sisters, in light of these processes currently underway, the coming months offer a unique opportunity to advocate and support the concrete actions which I have described with 4 verbs. And those 4 verbs were to welcome, to protect, to promote, and then to integrate refugees and migrants." And he called on all of the political and social actors involved who seek to be involved in the process, which will lead to the approval of the 2 global compacts. Next slide, please. And so this was a meeting that was held in 2016 at the UN, where 193 heads of state and high representatives of government meeting at the United Nations unanimously agreed to address urgent issues related to the large movements of refugees and migrants. And that's when they decided to, in the next years, to develop these 2 global compacts. But I want to also call attention to, at that time, they said there are roughly 65 million forcibly displaced persons, including 21 million refugees, 3 million asylum seekers, and over 40 million internally displaced. We now have 117 million forcibly displaced persons in the world. So you could see that even in spite of developing these compacts, we have made less progress and we've gone backward. And of course, one of the reasons that has added many forcibly displaced people is the ongoing invasion, full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian military. The next slide, please. In words and in deeds, Pope Francis repeatedly showed his deep compassion for all who were displaced. Witness his encounters with migrants and refugees on the islands of Lampedusa, and together with the ecumenical patriarch on the island of Lesbos, witness call for their full embrace to welcome, protect, to promote, and integrate migrants, refugees, and victims of human trafficking. He guided the church to assist the world community systematically improving its responses to the displaced. The international political community launched this multilateral process of consultations and negotiations with the goal of adopting the 2 global compacts at the end of 2018, one on international migrants and the other on refugees. Our dicastery held a listening process with local churches and with Catholic-inspired other faith-based and civil society organizations to identify the key points for advocacy with governmental leaders as they negotiated these two compacts. And we produced 20 points grounded on the migrants and refugees' needs identified at the grassroots level and on the church's best practices. And these points were approved directly by the Pope. Next slide, please. These are the major foci of the 20 points based on Pope Francis's call during the World Day of Migrants for migrants and refugees in 2018. First of all, welcoming. Increase safe and legal routes for migrants and refugees. The decision to emigrate should be made freely and voluntarily. Migration should be an orderly process which respects the laws of each country involved. Protecting. Defend the rights and dignity of migrants and refugees. The right to life is the most fundamental of all rights and cannot depend on a person's legal status. Promoting. Foster the integral human development of migrants and refugees. The Church has repeatedly emphasized the need to promote integral human development for migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees alongside local residents. Integrating. Greater participation of migrants and refugees to enrich local communities. The arrival of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees represents an opportunity for growth as much for the local communities as for the newcomers. The encounter of different cultures is a source of mutual enrichment, since inclusion and participation contribute to the development of societies. Pope Francis always spoke about integration as being a two-way street, and that just as people who are receiving and welcoming migrants are helping them, so too that host community, that welcome community, is enriched by the values, by the faith, by the culture, by the hard work, and by the determination and visions of hope by these newly arriving refugees and migrants. Next slide. We also prepare documents, again, listening to the local churches for specific responses at the local level. And this was a document that we prepared on prevention of and response to human trafficking. In the struggle against human trafficking, we developed a 40-page resource for all to use. The booklet offers information which can be implemented in local programs and groups collaborating at a distance. And it's entitled, Together We Are the Difference. The pastoral orientations on intercultural migrant ministry aim to further explore the need to come together into a single us, even wider and more welcoming, to include all the marginalized and give up the distinction between us and others, so that we can, if everyone may feel part of the one people of God. And one of the most recent World Days of Migrants and Refugees was given the theme by Pope Francis for a greater we. So again, eliminating us and them and saying that it's all of us who are in both the needs as well as in the responses. Next slide, please. Yes, and so then more recently, we developed pastoral orientations on climate displaced people. The climate crisis has a very human face, and this was mentioned in the video presentation that I just showed as well. It's already a reality for multitudes of vulnerable peoples worldwide. The Catholic Church provides pastoral care for those people who have been displaced from their homes by its effects. The pastoral orientations on climate displaced people explains the new challenges posed by the disturbing, perilous phenomena of climate disruption in many parts of the globe and suggests appropriate pastoral responses. For all of these documents, I've included the links to them, and also you could find all of them on our website. And that's www.humandevelopment.va. Next slide, please. Now I'll speak a little bit about the International Catholic Migration Commission, which I mentioned. I served as a Secretary General for them for 8 years. It's based in Geneva, Switzerland, and it's a global network of Catholic bishops' conferences in every region of the world, which are responding to the needs of migrants and refugees at regional, national, and local church levels. The organization is constantly inspired and guided by the doctrine and the tradition or the practical work of the Catholic Church, and aims on a daily basis to put the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ into practice as we reach out to serve the most vulnerable peoples and migrants, refugees and migrants all over the world. It's also inspired and motivated by their determination to overcome persecution, discrimination, affronts to their integrity, physical, emotional, and spiritual attacks, lack of access to the basic necessities of life, adequate nutrition, education, shelter, healthcare, and decent work with just pay. These migrants demonstrate that they strive to build new lives and futures for themselves and their beloved family members. And I included a link for the history of the organization if you're interested in seeing that at your leisure as well. Next slide, please. The ICMC was founded by Pope Pius XII in 1951, and it's been engaged in resettlement of refugees to new host countries. These are refugees who cannot return to their countries because of continuing war or continuing persecution in their home countries. They cannot be integrated into the first country they sought asylum in, and so they need a permanent third country that will welcome them. Our organization was responsible for the movement of 500,000 Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotian refugees from camps in Southeast Asia to new homes in the United States after the Southeast Asian wars in the 1990s and early 2000s. And I personally was involved in resettling some refugees who had escaped the Soviet Union, some Ukrainians and other Eastern European refugees back in the 1970s and the 1980s. The organization also engages in humanitarian assistance in various world conflicts and is a strong advocacy voice for fair and just policies related to migrants and refugees. More recently, we have supported the fair and just policies related to migrant workers. And we also support local church-based programs in every region of the world. Next slide, please. These are three principal areas of action for that ICMC organization, which is, again, a network of many different Catholic organizations. To serve more people on the move, to advocate for rights and dignity, and to build networks. Next slide, please. And this will be the last part of my presentation. I wanted to share with you the Catholic Response for Ukraine Working Group. And again, part of this was very quickly after the full-scale invasion in February of 2022. Pope Francis constantly spoke of what he calls our martyred Ukraine, and he called this for peace and for a settlement of this unjust situation time and time again. But this was something he said in June of 2022. Every day I carry in my heart the dear and tormented Ukraine, which continues to be scourged by barbaric attacks. I pray that this insane war may soon see an end, and I renew the invitation to persevere without tiring in prayer for peace. May the Lord open those paths of dialogue that men are unwilling or unable to find, and let us not neglect to come to the aid of the Ukrainian people who are suffering so much. I'm sure that he still is saying those prayers now from his new life in heaven. Please, the next slide. So in early March 2022, at the suggestion of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, the representatives of major global Catholic-inspired humanitarian organizations, Caritas Internationalis, Jesuit Refugee Services, the International Catholic Migration Commission, the Sovereign Order of Malta, DePaul International, Knights of Columbus, the Santa Marta Group, Stella Maris for seafarers, and the councils of Episcopal conferences in Europe, including collaboration with Maestral International and the Catholic Health Association of the USA, formed a Catholic Response for Ukraine working group to share information about their actions in the affected region, Ukraine, and especially those neighboring countries that were first receiving the refugees from Ukraine, and to jointly address gaps, see how we could help more at things that were not being addressed. My own organization, I was still in Geneva at that time, was requested to assume convening responsibilities for the coordination efforts of the working group. The group committed itself to remain informed about ongoing situation in Ukraine and in the countries that were welcoming Ukrainian refugees. And the ICMC prepared more than 160 weekly briefing reports on the situation, including global, regional, national, and local and church-related reports. We shared information about our own activities and on the gaps identified. And we maintain close ties with the local church efforts and needs. And we listen to those directly affected by the war. Next slide, please. Part of that process of listening included my own service as the chairperson of the group. I made 4 solidarity visits to the country since the full-scale invasion in 2022. During our first visit, which was in the summer of 2022, our delegation traveled from Krakow to Przemysl, Poland. There we met at the seminary, which was hosting refugees. And I also was privileged to address all of the Greek Catholic bishops who were gathered in Holy Synod in Przemysl, since they could not meet in Ukraine at that time. And I shared with them the efforts that we were making with this working group. We were offered then a ride across the border by the Latin Catholic Archbishop of Lviv. And shortly after crossing the border, we stopped at a newly constructed abbey of Benedictine monks. Within weeks after their arrival, the monks were joined by some 18 sisters who had to flee the capital city of Kyiv due to the repeated bombings at the beginning of the war. Then some 150 more displaced persons arrived. Now, the Benedictines follow the rule of Saint Benedict, whose theme and whose charism that he gave to them was ora et labora, pray and work. And the abbot of the monastery told us that he and his fellow monks learned an important lesson in welcoming the refugees. He said, we have to be Christians first and then monks second. And he said that he told the displaced person that he committed the monks to be available to the displaced persons at any the time of the day and night, and then to catch up on their prayers after they made themselves available to those who were in need. For another visit, I told the displaced persons that we had come to learn from them and we had no prepared speeches for them. They expressed their gratitude to the local church for having been received with such gentle care. One woman pointed out that food and shelter was not enough, since they also needed to ease their hearts and souls, and that they had found much loving care at the seminary in Ivano-Frankivsk. During these local solidarity visits, the sights, sounds, and feelings were not always easier to encounter, but the tenacity and resilience of those forcibly displaced persons renewed my faith in the human dignity that God gifted to each of them, despite the suffering and loss to which they have been subjected. I often remember our visit to a bread-making effort that was set up in a monastery of passionate priests in Ivano-Frankivsk. The priests had moved out of their convent so that they could have room for those who were internally displaced. The women from the local parish were joined by displaced women from eastern Ukraine. Many of their houses had been destroyed. They were baking 600 loaves of bread each day, which they shared with the facilities sheltering other displaced persons. This was indeed the modern miracle of the multiplication of loaves and fishes. A young priest told me that he had been ordained 1 week previously, but he was coordinating a huge operation of service and comfort for people traumatized by the war. I shared with him that I had just observed the 50th anniversary of my priestly ordination. We embraced and we promised to pray for each other as we continued our prayers for peace in Ukraine. Next slide, please. A great deal of our work as the International Catholic Migration Commission was to support diocesan-based mental health hubs. And there were several of these mental health hubs set up both by the Latin Catholic Church and by the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in Ukraine. And these are some photos of some meetings that I had with the teams of psychologists who were being supported by the International Catholic Migration Commission. And I did not plan the services until I went and listened to the people and their needs. At first, I had the idea that perhaps I would need to send in external psychologists and therapists, and I didn't need to do that at all. There were plenty of well-trained and professionally competent psychologists and other therapists right in Ukraine. But the church did not have the funds to be able to pay them very modest salaries. And so we were able to seek money to be able to help them do the work. They also asked me to help arrange for some specialized training for them. They told me that they had been handling a great deal of individual psychological problems, of marriage problems, of family problems, but they were not used to, at that point in time, dealing with the trauma of war and with the loss, massive loss of property and of limbs and of so many people who were killed during the war. And so they needed help from experts to teach them about trauma treatment and especially the prevention of suicide. And so we were able to get that kind of help for them as well. Next slide, please. With the help of a Catholic Foundation, the organization helped to support these training programs for seminarians, those who are studying to become priests, both Latin Catholic priests and Ukrainian Greek Catholic priests in the formation centers, to prepare them for addressing spiritual needs of people deeply affected by war, and to recognize the signs of deeper emotional trauma that might require referrals to qualified mental health professionals. We were told very quickly that many Ukrainians did not have much confidence in professional psychologists because of the manipulation that was done of that profession during the Soviet Union times. And so we knew that they did have trust in the priests and the religious. And so we wanted to help those preparing for priesthood be a bridge, understanding the needs of the people, addressing their spiritual needs, but then also referring them to competent psychologists, and especially to these psychologists who are working in the church psychological hubs. And I had the privilege of joining them in some of this training, one of the first training programs they had. And some of the priests and seminarians shared the fact that they had lost their own relatives to the horrible war, and that they too were grieving and fearful. You see here, I was attending evening prayer with the seminarians at the Greek Catholic Seminary in Lviv, and they expressed thanks in support of this training. Since then, we've done 3 cycles of training in all 6 Greek Catholic seminaries of Ukraine and in 3 Latin Catholic seminaries in Ukraine. And then I told them about how I really was so grateful to see the great faith among the people, the Ukrainian people. And I thought this was key to their resilience, their generosity in responding to the needs of their fellow compatriots, and their rootedness in hope for restoration of dignity and freedom in the country. The seminarians asked for advice on how they could better accompany the suffering people in the country. I told them to listen to the people. They should not feel that they needed to give immediate or sophisticated responses to the people who find themselves in the midst of suffering and loss. They need to become comfortable with joining in silent suffering and inviting the people to appeal for God's strength and mercy and the miraculous help in bringing an end to the war and the persecution. Unfortunately, regrettably, they're still having to do this. And again, my heart is very much with the people in Ukraine. One of the things that the seminarians in the Greek seminary of Lviv is that they now have regular time at the cemetery, the central cemetery, which I have visited several times, in trying to give immediate help and grief counseling to the relatives who are coming to the graves of their fallen soldiers. The next slide, please. And here were some of the houses of mercy, places where that they were welcoming refugees and migrants, but they also had already been helping those most in need in the country. And this is one that the St. Nicholas House of Mercy in Lviv, and I really see them as fulfilling Jesus's command: whatever you do for the little ones, you do for me. And here you could see during our visits, first of all, they formed a football team. And these young men who were growing up in some of the large institutions in Ukraine, in the Lviv area, have now been performing very well in football. And so they won the All Lviv Championship. And now they hope to be able to go to the national championships for the young football players. Also, they've been working hard to not use these big institutions, but to have children who cannot be with their biological families go to smaller home-like environments. And this is one that we visited, Mama Katerina, a lay woman who has brought into professional foster care, and this is supported by the government, 10 children. And already she has seen some of her children, 2 of them at university. We visited a similar one in Chortkiv, where 2 of the young people in these small foster homes have been married, and yet they still see their religious sister, who's the mama, as a real parent to them. At the St. Nicholas Center, they also do a great deal of work with children with disabilities, both displaced children and local children. And the organization, my organization, was able to help them buy some special tools, buy hearing aids and special smartphones for deaf children to be able to communicate with their parents and therefore have more independence of their own as they grow up. And also a great deal of work with the parents and the families. Next slide, please. And these are some photos from Chortkiv. And here's a woman who lost her son and her grandchildren and her husband in bombings in the East, and now has been with these people at the House of Mercy. The woman that you see here embracing a young woman, when I met her, she was speaking perfect Italian to me, and I asked her how she spoke Italian. She said that she had lived in Italy for many years, but then she herself had a very serious problem with her spine. She could no longer walk, and she went back to Ukraine and was not able to do very much. And suddenly she was able to find a place to get the kind of physical therapy that she needed. And she now is the director of this House of Mercy. So one who had received the help is now helping so many others. Next slide, please. I won't go through all of this. If you're interested, you could see it on the slide that I'm sure will be shared with you, but it's kind of a summary of the many different services that were done by different organizations in this working group. But I believe that they were able to do more because they shared with each other. And also then they were able to identify needs that they saw but could not respond to, and we were able to have others do the same. I'll mention one of them, Stella Maris, and they have it's a service for seafarers. I have visited them several times in Odessa. I heard that one of you is from Odessa, and they've done a great deal. First of all, with the families of the seafarers who were stuck on the ships for a long time during the COVID time, and also because of the embargo of Odessa by the Russian military. And now since that time, they still are helping the families and also helping some of the seafarers who are leaving the work of seafaring and trying to get them established once again and helping them find jobs. Then the final slide, please. These are just some my thoughts, and I'm sure you could give me many more thoughts and many more answers than I could offer. But I spent all of the Latin Holy Week and Easter week of 2024 in Ukraine, visiting various parts of the country, being with the people as they, at least with the Latin Church, celebrated Easter, and with the Greek Catholics as they prepared to celebrate Easter shortly thereafter. And it was such a troubling contrast, the increasing despair and yet the struggles to keep up faith. The deep piety and devotion in the churches, yet increasing drug and alcohol abuse, torture and trauma by the military on both sides, deep family divisions, increase in divorces and marital difficulties. The war is omnipresent. I don't need to tell you that, you're there. But most disturbing in the east, where the bombing and fighting is constant. Yet no part of Ukraine is spared the alerts, the indiscriminate bombing and destruction of water and electricity infrastructures. The funerals, how many times as I was traveling from one part of on the highway to another city, we would be stopped because of the funerals of a local fallen soldier. And all of the people in the village would be on the street, on the highway, kneeling on the highway as the funeral car came by, and then laying flowers down in the road. And then the uncertainty of the future, the insecurity that still is there. And the many people who said to me, please don't forget us like others have. We need your help now more than ever. And then the mental health impact of war will be with us for generations. So we need to ask ourselves, at least those of us who are not in Ukraine, but also you, what answers will we offer the martyred people of Ukraine? And one last slide, please. I'm not going to go through this, but as a result of that working group for Ukraine, now many of those same organizations have decided to put together a much larger working group for the response to all emergencies. We have so many emergencies all over the world. The Catholic Church and other churches are very much involved in the immediate humanitarian assistance all over the world. And yet, so many times our own organizations within the Catholic Church, and then even organizations of other faith-based groups, work separately. They do good work, but we don't share with each other. And so now we're going to work on a much larger work and then break it down into smaller working groups on the different crises we're facing, and certainly some of the greatest crises we're facing right now, still including Ukraine, but also Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. I want to thank you for this time together, and I'm certainly available from some questions and conversation for the time that we have remaining.
Monsignor Vitillo, we thank you for this very informative and interesting presentation, and special thanks for your involvement with Ukraine and for the help that you provided or were instrumental with for our community. Thank you. And yes, indeed, now we have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions, and there are a few. So I will start with the question that Yuri Tarabon asks. And here is the question I translate from Ukrainian. The issue of forced migrants is a consequence of unsettled armed conflicts. So I have a well-grounded impression that the religious community now has lost its ability to influence society. That is, to influence society in the way that it would radically solve the problem and not to be just a reaction to a problem. Could you comment on that, refute the thesis, or confirm the observation I make?
Well, thank you for the question, and it's certainly a big question for all of us today. First of all, I agree with you that much of the forced migration is because of unresolved armed conflicts. However, I think we also have to see that there's much forced migration also because of religious persecution, ethnic persecution, even in places where there is not armed conflict going on for other reasons. And then also because of the fact that we still have such an imbalance in our use and enjoyment of the world's resources and of money. And so there are many, many places, people living in places where they don't have access to basic human needs. And much of that causes forced migration. And there's a big debate in the world all the time. Can we really say that they're refugees? Well, according to the Geneva Convention, we cannot say that, but we also can't just ignore the fact that so many people have to leave to be able to have food for their children and decent work and a way of having a dignified future for their families. So I think there are a number of causes for this. I think in terms of your question about or your comment about the church has lost its ability to propose and to bring about some solutions. In some ways, I believe you're right. And in other ways, I would disagree with you. I think that many times we have a real problem, first of all, with the lack of ethical leadership in the country, national leadership in countries. And I think we see that in many, many different countries. And then because of that, we also have a situation where those international organizations that we established after World War II, and which I made reference to, and the basic documents that we negotiated at that time to prevent the problems of World War once again, they helped for a long time. But now there's been a loss of confidence in them. In some ways, those organizations may have become too inflated and too bureaucratic. But in other ways, they did a great deal, especially in terms of humanitarian response. And now, because of the lack of confidence in those, and also because of the pulling out of the support of those organizations, I think they have much harder and greater difficulty to try to negotiate just solutions to serious problems. Also, it takes so long to do that. So I think that's a real problem. I think there still is some confidence to principled religious leadership. And I could tell you, as one who worked with the Vatican's mission to the UN in Geneva for many years, 19 years, I served as their attaché for health. And I can tell you, the Vatican has a seat at the table because of it is a separate country of Vatican City State and the Holy See. And, many times during the UN meetings, when other countries would be speaking, there'd be a lot of buzz in the room. They'd be talking to each other without listening to the speaker. But every time I would, or one of my colleagues would raise the flag of the Holy See, there was silence. Even those countries that didn't agree with us wanted to hear what we were saying. And I think that was a sign of the fact that we were also bringing an ethical and religious values. We had no great military industrial complex. We had no great army except the Swiss Guards in Vatican City State. And we have no big business, but we were able to bring those values out in those discussions. And I think we need to do that. And not only the Holy See, which has a seat at the table, but also other religious organizations and religious leaders that also respect it in many different ways. So I'd agree with you in part and disagree with you in part.
Thank you. That's very scholastic answers, I would say, with good distinctions, but with grounding in reality. So thank you. Another question comes from Sergei Kalensky, who says, Dear Robert, could you expand on defending rights and dignity of refugees? Like, what are the practical steps to doing that? And I suppose it's more like from personal perspective, or maybe a local parish perspective. Which practical steps would you suggest?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important for us to help the people in the local parishes understand Jesus's command to receive the refugees, and whomever we receive, we're receiving him. Because many times, especially I could tell you, although I don't live in the United States, I hear about what's going on in the United States, and many people are deceived by false news and by the kind of social media that's so separated that they never get the truth, which often lies in the middle. So I think it's important for them to know that it's an obligation of Christians to receive those in need, and and then also to learn from them and receive their care and their love and the values that they bring to us as well. Then I think that there are other institutional things that we could do, and many practical things could be done at that local level, such as being sure that people are received, they have a place to stay, helping those who are being resettled to find a way of finding jobs, help prepare to seek those jobs, having them seek to be able to enroll their children in school, and all of those things that newly arriving people need to do. So then I think that we also institutionally need to be sure, and this we do with many of the Catholic organizations in the United States, but also throughout the world, that we help to represent those refugees and those migrants through legal services that we make available to them, because there are many unfair procedures that are going on against the migrants, both in the United States, but also here in Europe. And so we need to make sure that they have representation, that they know what their rights are. And also, even if they're not there living there with regular status, they still have some rights. And therefore, we need to train people, even some people from the parishes, to go and to represent them. And then also more institutionally, to have organizations like Caritas and other organizations of the church to do that kind of help to preserve the rights. And then finally, we need to do the advocacy at the local level, all the way up to the United Nations and the national levels. Church leaders often could go meet with the heads of state, and they need to bring these issues to the heads of state, but then also at the international level. And then at the local level, help the refugees and the migrants show what they're doing to local people. I'll tell you one example. In the organization I was running, we were helping to integrate some of the refugees in Europe who wound up in Greece and wanted to go on to Germany or to Austria or to the United States, but couldn't leave. And so we helped settle them in some of the local towns. In one of those towns in the mountains, they had a flood. And it was the migrants that showed up, because most of the people, the locals, were old. And so it was the migrants that showed up and helped to clean up the town from all of the mud and the debris. And that's when the local people realized that they were not only giving a place to stay to the migrants, but they were receiving from them as well.
A very interesting perspective and a good example. Thank you. The other question comes from Andrei Cherny, and it's based on a TV show by Paolo Sorrentino, The New Pope. I don't know whether you watched that TV show, The New Pope. It's from 2020. But Andrei explains his question. There is an episode where the fictional Pope Francis II opens the doors of the Vatican City to immigrants and refugees. He offers them shelter within its walls. This bold act discomforts the cardinals and ultimately costs the Pope his position. Do you think that the message of this episode criticizes the gap between the Vatican's words and actions, lack of radical hospitality regarding refugees, or is it merely a provocative satire? Thank you.
Well, I didn't see the fictional version, so it's hard for me to offer an opinion on that. But I could tell you the real life situation. And that is that certainly the Vatican has been involved in offering refuge to refugees and to migrants for many, many years. And I think I mentioned one was the concern of Pope Benedict XV, more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago now, in helping those who were victims of World War I and helping them to get aid, and also using the Vatican money to almost exhausting all the Vatican's money, in fact, at that time, to fund the efforts of the church throughout the world and even in Vatican City State. And then World War II, many times I believe that Pope Pius XII has given a very false reputation or false accusations that he was anti-Semitic. But he actually had a lot of Jewish people seeking refuge inside Vatican City State, inside that very small city state that we have in the center of Rome. He opened the doors to many of them. And as well, he made sure that many of them throughout Rome and throughout Italy had refuge from the Catholic Church. And then he opened up the summer palace in Castel Gandolfo in Italy, about 26 kilometers outside of Rome, and was giving shelter to thousands of Jewish refugees at that time. So I think in real life, we've been doing that. Now, did everyone agree with it? I don't know. There may have been some who didn't agree with that. But certainly that has not stopped our popes from doing it, or our organizations. And more recently, Pope Francis himself has worked with the Safe Corridors program that was done by Caritas Internationalis and by the Sant'Egidio Foundation to welcome a number of refugees from different parts of the world, but especially from the Middle East, and now more recently from the Democratic Republic of Congo, to come and have refuge in Italy and in Vatican City. And so Pope Francis himself resettled several families, and brought them back with him when he was on his trip, on the flight from his trip to Iraq.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Reality is more exciting than a fiction, and that's probably good. And I think we have very little time left, and there are two more questions, so I will read them quickly and will ask you to comment on that. One question comes from Joel Mananga. He asks, compared with all the migrants in the world, what could be the rate of climate migrants last year?
I think on the rate of climate migrants, we don't know yet, because we're still trying to follow it and to get better, both realistic statistics from now, and also then to look into the future. We know there will be many more. We know that there will be some countries in the South Pacific that will be completely covered over by water. But also we have more and more problems in other parts of the world, in the Sahel region of Africa, and in other parts of Africa, Ethiopia, for instance, and Eritrea. So it's really hard to give some numbers, but we do know that there are many, and some of them have really began to migrate, especially in South Pacific area, the Oceania region, already began to migrate, seeking work in other countries, but didn't always link that to the climate change that they already were seeing and now is much worse.
Yeah, sadly. But thank you for the answer. And probably the last question. It comes from Martha Strickland. She writes, in the USA, I find the local Catholic parishes seemingly to be disconnected from the efforts of local faith groups serving displaced peoples / refugees. What advice do you have for those of us working with refugees in local communities to engage local Catholics in this work to enhance collaboration with all faith efforts in a local community, which may better reflect the commitments to migrants that you have noted in your presentation?
Well, thank you for that question. I think part of it is that maybe the people in the local communities are not hearing enough from their priests. The priest has a very privileged position of the pulpit every Sunday. And it's really important to for the priests to talk about the migrants and the refugees. But I think in many, many parishes in the United States, we now have many migrants as well. So they're obviously there in the communities. A lot of times they help their own people from their own communities within the parish. But it is important for the priest to do that and to encourage more of a kind of coming together of the different groups in the parish and sharing culturally and also around the needs and the help that can be given. But I have to say, in my own experience, and this I know also from close listening to what's happening in the United States, many of the Catholic Charities agencies that have been resettling and serving the migrants and the refugees are doing that by partnering with the parishes. And I know now that even now that because the presidential administration has cut off a great deal of funding for that kind of local help through the parishes and through the agencies of the Catholic Church, those parishes continue to do that work. And the Catholic Charities are doing a great deal of that work with volunteers. So I think there is local involvement, but much more is needed.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I just would like to say that a few people who are in chat, they also thanking you, those who ask questions and those who listen to you. So they send their thanks for your personal witness, for the information you provided, and for wise and interesting answers that you offered to these questions. And also on behalf of our team and our Eastern European Institute of Theology, we thank you for your time and your presence, and of course, all your work that you are doing. So thank you very much, Father Robert.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Monsignor, for your time, and thank you for making room for us and for your visitation. It was an amazing presentation, and definitely we have a lot to study from your experience and the ministry to other people. So thank you for that, and thank you for your compassion and your commitment to also serve people in Ukraine who are going through the challenges that war brought. So thank you for your time.